So we have point 5, Tiţķune, I think, Soferim. Tiţķune Soferim. I like to put a little accent on that, but I don't know what accent. Tannaitic sources mention several passages of Scripture in which the conclusion is inevitable that the ancient reading must have differed from that of the present text. The explanation of this phenomenon is given in the expression, Scripture has used euphemistic language, in other words, to avoid anthropomorphism and anthropopathism. You just check that out. Anthropomorphism, representation of the deity under human form or with human attributes and affections. The ascription of human characteristics to things not human. Well, that's pretty close. And what was the other word? Anthropopathism. Anthropopathism. Oh, okay. There it is. Wow. The ascription of human feelings or passions to God. Okay. Gotcha. This guy knows his vocabulary. In any case, R. Simon B. Pazzi, an amora of the 3rd century, calls these readings emendations of the Scribes. Assuming that the Scribes actually made the changes. This view was adopted by the later Midrash and by the majority of the Masorites. So they didn't like that idea in there because they didn't like God being attributed with human characteristics because he's not human. He's God. In Masoretic works, these changes are ascribed to Ezra and Nehemiah, to Ezra and the Soferim, or to Ezra, Nehemiah, Zechariah, Haggai, and Baruch. All these descriptions mean one and the same thing, that the changes were made by the men of the Great Synagogue. Ben Asher remarks that the proper expression would have been Diţduḳe, or whatever it is, but in the sense of the oldest sources, the only proper expression would have been a term which in an old variant has really been preserved. So they're nitpicking on things, not going to change the meaning or interpretation. The term Tiţķune Soferim has been understood by different scholars in various ways. Some regard it as a viva voce correction or modification of biblical language authorized by the Soferim for homiletical purposes. In other words, the Scribes interpret a supposed euphemism, poetic language, and their interpretation is called Tiţķune Soferim. Homiletical. H-O-M. How do you spell it? H-O-M-I-L-E-T-C-I-L. A-L. H-O-M-I-L-E-T-C. Homiletic. Well, pertaining to the family, social, affable, conversational, companionable, pertaining to homiletics, hortatory. Okay. We got it. In other words, for the purpose of producing a sermon. Others take it to mean a mental change made by the original writers or redactors of Scripture. The latter shrank from putting in writing a thought which some of the readers might expect them to express, considering the various interpretations and the fact that neither the number nor the identity of the passages in question is definite. So, and without mentioning him, Barnes come to the conclusion that the Tiţķune tradition belongs rather to the Midrash than to the Masorah. Its true bearing is on exegesis, not on textual criticism. So the Tiḳḳune Soferim are interpretations, not readings. The Tiख़un tradition is probably connected with a tradition which ascribes the redaction of several books of Scripture to the Great Synagogue. There are, however, phenomena in the biblical text which force one to assume that at some time textual criticism had been made. Because when you got different manuscripts that are maybe differing from one another, you have to make some interpretation of the meaning and the intended meaning and so on and so forth. These corrections may be classified under the following heads. Removal of unseemly expression used in reference to God. In other words, the substitution of bless for to curse in certain passages. Page from a 13th century manuscript Bible bearing Masoretic notes written to form ornamental decorations in the British Museum, safeguarding the tetragrammaton, substitution of Elohim for Yahweh in some passages. Under this head, some have counted such phenomena as the variants of the divine names in Theophorus proper names, Joahaz for Jehoahaz, Elijah for Eliyahu, but comparable on this point. Okay, so they're kind of nitpicking on stuff. It's not going to change anything that much. Removal of application of the names of false gods to Yahweh, the change of the name Yishbel to Ishboesesh, kind of traditional stuff. Safeguarding the unity of divine worship at Jerusalem. Here belongs the change, Isaiah 19:18 for or. And here's point 6. These are minutiae little points. Micra and etur, among the earliest technical terms used in connection with the activities of the scribes, are the Mikram Soferim and etur Soferim. In the Geonic schools, the first term U was taken to signify a certain vowel change which were made in words in pause or after the article. The second, the cancellation of a few passages in the wa conjunctive, where the and conjunctive, where it had been by some been wrongly read. They're trying to fix things up because the Bible has been a long time in falling apart, and now they're correcting it. The objection to such an explanation is that the first changes would fall under the general head of fixation of pronunciation, and the second under the head of keri and ketib. Various explanations have therefore been offered by ancient as well as modern scholars without having, however, succeeding in furnishing a satisfactory solution. So undecided construction. In other words, they're coming across these manuscripts and they don't know what to do with it, so they're kind of describe what they're doing and leave you reasons why they did things. A number of words is mentioned by the Talmud 5 by later authorities which negatively expressed have no, but positively expressed according to this Masoretic note, should be understood to mean that the scribes had left undecided the question whether the affected words belong to the preceding or to the following clause. Okay. But such an interpretation may be objected to for two reasons. First, the accentuation fixes the construction of these words in a very definite way. Now let me stop here. We have our Bible today. Sometimes we have notes, like when you go to the original text, you have some notes to look at, and they give you an explanation or the marginal notes of what one thing should mean or another. Even if one assumes that the accentuators had acted high-handedly and had disregarded tradition, which is not probable, it is impossible to conceive how in public worship the words were recited to indicate such doubtful construction. So they modified things. The reader must have connected them either with the first or with the second clause. Okay. Secondly, a still graver objection is that some of those words may make sense in only one clause, the one in which the accentuators have put them. It must therefore be assumed that the tradition refers here to exegesis, not to textual criticism. I pause again here. Go here. And I have things called commentaries. And I read these commentaries, expositors and Bible knowledge commentary, and they give you some explanation in their interpretation. For example, in Psalm 145:17, these observations lead the psalmist to a renewed reflection on the nature of God. He is righteous and loving. See, it gives you an explanation of the text. And let's take a look at that again. He's righteous and loving. Let's take a look at the text. 145:17. See, the Lord is righteous in all his ways and gracious in all his acts. And we go back to the commentary. These observations lead the psalmist to a renewed reflection on the nature of God. He is righteous and loving. And he goes into further explanation. So this is something similar to what we're talking about here with the authors of the Masoretic text, or the translators. Secondly, a still graver objection is that some of the words might make sense only in one clause, the one in which the accentuators have put them. It must therefore be assumed that the tradition refers here to exegesis, not to textual criticism. That is how they interpret. It must refer to what is termed by later scholars a kind of construction, wherein the word is understood to follow itself immediately. Tradition was undecided whether these words were to be read merely as they stood, or understood also with the following word. So they're doing nuances of stuff, paying attention. Very few of these really make a big difference in how to interpret the passage. Suspended letters and dotted words. There are 4 words having one of their letters suspended above the line. One of them, Judges 18:30, is due to a correction of the original text out of reference for Moses. The original origin of the other 3, in Psalm, Job, 2 places, is doubtful. According to some, they are due to mistaken majuscular letters. According to others, they are later insertions of originally omitted weak consonants. In 15 passages in the Bible, some words are stigmatized. The difference, the significance of the dots is disputed. Some hold them to be marks of erasure. Others believe them to indicate that in some collated manuscripts, the stigmatized words were missing, hence that the reading is doubtful. Still, others contend that they are merely a mnemonic device to indicate homiletical explanations which the ancients had connected with those words. Finally, some maintain the dots were designed to guard against the omission by copyists of text elements which, at first glance or after comparison with parallel passages, seem to be superfluous. Instead of dots, some manuscripts exhibit strokes, vertical or else horizontal. The first 2 explanations are unacceptable for the reason that such faulty readings would belong to Keri and Kittib, which in case of doubt, the majority of manuscripts would decide. The last 2 theories have equal probability. You want to make a problem with this? Just go to a good commentary like Expositor's Bible Commentary, Bible Knowledge Commentary, and these guys are up to speed on these things. Inverted letters. In 9 passages of the whole Bible are found signs usually called inverted nuns, because resembling the letter here, which I don't know what that is. Others find a resemblance in these signs to these other Hebrew letters. As Krauss holds that the signs were originally oblai and have text-critical value. He assumes that the correct reading in Masoretische Soferim, but the original reading seems to be a word of unknown etymology. Minor things. If the word stands for asterisk, it would be a synonym of and means simply sign, but the reading ram's horn yields a very good sense. It is the Greek which had exactly such a sign and served the same purpose. Well, you know what? You got a problem with that particular passage in the Masoretic text, the Hebrew Bible. You go to the Septuagint, and guess where? Your commentators will come up with a comparison and give you the correction. A lot of times I've come up with a problem between one thing and another in the Hebrew text, and I look at the Septuagint because my commentator suggested to do that and gives you a good understanding. Point 10, marginal readings. Even in antiquity, substitutions were made, at first only orally in public worship. Later also in the form of marginal notes in private copies of readings other than those found in the text. As Frankel has shown, even in the Septuagint, he knew those readings and frequently adopted them. These variants have various origins. Some of them represent variants in ancient manuscripts and have therefore text-critical value. Others